Can Cebu still be saved with our problems with the ongoing traffic, overquarrying of our mountains, and constant flooding of the city? Meet Marian, a Cebuana and an accomplished architect, who during the course of her work has created award-winning national frameworks for Singapore's built environment. She is also the founder of the Regenesis Project, a think tank, design studio, and a regenerative organization dedicated to help places heal and be a positive impact in its surroundings. Her initiative started in Bohol. Together with her family, they aim to transform Bohol's degraded lands into living ecosystems while integrating tourism through this regenerative process. Now she has her sights on her hometown, Cebu. In this episode, she explains how the city should have been planned from the beginning to address all its current issues from flooding to urban congestion. Marian's vision for Cebu goes beyond reducing harm. It's about restoring ecosystems, rethinking infrastructures, even challenging our mindsets to ultimately improve the quality of life of every Cebuano.
Mga what year gani ka to nilargag Singaporean?
Kuan. So we took the board and then I worked for 1 year, but I was already convinced that I don't want to go into architecture after after technically topping the
Di ba
board.
na di
Yeah.
ba nakigimension ato? I know I forgot na katong word na imong gigamit. Like nganong naka-decide ka na?
There was one turning point. Okay, I'm serving the client, but is that it? But then akong true passion really is nature and sustainability. And we're not taught that. We're just taught tropical design. But how do you actually practice architecture in a way that, you know, is for the greater good? So nakarealize ko sa akong own shortcut. Like I am not equipped to practice in the way that I want. So I just decided I might as well quit the profession because I add to the problem. Motong I my first job was at MDC, and to be fair, naman to po si Jude dito. Yeah,
Yeah, magdaghan
I
mo dito sila Xiao.
Xiao to si Xiao, Jude, there was more. Yeah, meron pa to. Yeah,
And I bet murag wala pud ka nalipay dito.
ako nalipay for sure. It was like a short-term
Yeah,
stint.
I can
And then
imagine.
my parents encouraged me like you should go abroad. So I did. Supposedly na ako interview for Singapore arranged by my uncle. And then I flew here with other two other classmates pod. So I came here. I thought I had a job lined up, but it turns out the company didn't do their research. Dili sila maka dawat og for wala sila quota for foreigners. So I mura bitaw, oh no, I have to find a job on my own. Lisod kaayo. That was one of the lowest. Mura bitaw, it was a very humbling experience kay with the flying colors.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, all of
Uh-huh.
that. And then pag abot diri, I had a hard time finding work. It took me 1 to 2 months. At first, you would apply to all the big firms. Like,
Right,
you want to work
right.
at Waha,
Uh,
all that. But none of them were applying. Were replying. And then I go through the mga listings, but none of them were replying. And I rented them on like a bunk bed in a Filipino home. And then ang landowner, he shared with me an Excel file of like hundreds or thousands of email addresses of all these firms, like construction firms, design firms, or whatever. So you know what I did? Every day I would email mga 500 firms just to find a job
500 every day.
a
Wow.
day. Yeah. So I had
Yeah.
to make many, email addresses para lang para, para just get anything. So finally, I landed like a very entry level drafter at a construction firm. But like whatever, just start somewhere. Uh, so that was my first job here. But because I had prior knowledge in BIM because of
Right,
BIM, because
MDC,
of
yes.
MDC, and before that my dad made me learn it. I created the system for BIM in that company, and then I became BIM manager through my own initiative. And
Nice.
then I applied for a grant because Singapore government has a lot of grants to increase productivity man for firms. So I applied for that in behalf of the company, and then I na my format with a report. So I presented what we were doing, and then they got very impressed. So the officer was like, "Could you present this to my boss?" So they set up another meeting, and then I presented to his boss, and
Right.
then he's like, "Could you present this to my boss?" Long story short, they told me like, "I think you should work for government. Like, you should not be working there. Like, this is too." They were very impressed with that framework, because it was something that they were working on, and I had already figured it out. I realized I love frameworks. I love systems. I love systems thinking. Even if it's not architecture, I want to see how things work, the interaction.
So
So
this
that's how
was
I
sorry, this was in
20
around 12, I guess, 13 estimate lang.
2013. Oh, 2012 to 2013. I only worked 1 year in Singapore at like a entry level job before technically na pirate ko to work at government. So they started 2010. So
Right.
they were
Bago
on
pa.
their first BIM roadmap. Yeah. And Singapore is very, very top down. When they want something, they want everyone to do it. So ang nakanindot sa government agency here, it is its own think tank, manggod. The government is a think tank, unlike nato diri ba where we brain drain, we export all our thinking to external companies. So they hire the best of the best, and they have to hire people who really know what they're doing. And then we create. That's the amazing thing about that job. Even though it was not on sustainability, we created national frameworks. Literally, I created national frameworks and standards for the whole national industry, and
Wow.
then they will have to implement it. So I create a framework, and then typically a roadmap is 2 years, and then we would test it out in pilots. We would work with the top firms in the industry, and then we would collect the best practices, and then I would codify that into standards, and then create the training program, and then train the industry. And then one of the only Filipinas working there. And then they were award winning. So I technically designed like award winning frameworks for Singapore government. That was a very, very I think that was the best detour I could have possibly taken. If it was not architecture, that was the best possible detour. Like learning how they think, like how a country like Singapore thinks, how they do things, why they're so effective. They're not doing more things actually. They're doing less, but it's exactly the correct things to do because there's so much thought. Um,
So
mm,
ikaw lang ang basically ikaw ang were you the only one working for that framework or daghan mo na
yeah, yeah. So we're a very small team, and because we're very small, every one of us is looking at different aspects of it. And technically, I was like known as Yani the framework girl. So like, if framework gani, give it to Yani or ingana ba. Um, yeah. So
well, that's
this,
good, no? The marag pasabot nimo na you really have kanang deep insights na gyud of how Singapore works sa in the
yeah.
construction industry or design industry.
Yeah. Most importantly, it's more like how Singapore thinks,
Right.
because everything starts with how we think. The systems that we create are born out of the way we think. So if we design systems like in the Philippines, the Priting Gubuta, all of these are symptoms of the systems that we created, if you think about it, of the policies that we created, of the planning paradigms that we have created. All of that is coming out of our mind. So we have the wrong thinking about it. Like we don't understand nature, or we're coming from a very fragmented design or planning paradigm. Oh, guba na nadaan. So so that's what I really learned here. Kay grabe kay ka holistic. If they want something that is like a national agenda, it trickles down to literally every single relevant agency. So the framework that I created is not something in isolation kay tungod someone wants it, but it is serving a bigger agenda, which is serving a bigger agenda, which is serving a national agenda.
Yeah. So nasa bigger like plan for the whole government, right?
Yeah,
Ang pag-implement. Pero in
yeah.
contrast, like kung ingana, so ang Philippines day, like how do you see how Philippines work? Like just a general idea lang,
We don't think.
right?
Go think back when we're back in school, when we do thesis,
Yes.
we create a book and then padaghanay tag data, you know? Let's just put all the data there. And then we produce a plan and then we comply with code. Everything actually is just training us how to obey and how to comply with code. If you boil down the essence of our architectural system of our architecture degree is to prepare us for the board, but the board is to test us on how well we know code. If imo lang i-distill so that you license professionals based on like, yeah, they know code or what. But that goes to say that our codes are good. They're not. They're so very, very, very broken. And I know this because I have analysis. I studied them. Realize ko like, oh my God, this is really the problems that we have is by design. And then we don't think about it because technically we're being compliant, right? So we don't question it. Yeah. So diha palang daan when we're not taught how to question because we're not taught how to think. We're not taught how to think critically and then translate that to design. Um, then it creates a very, very, very broken system. That's why I left technically. Yeah.
Do you think it's more, can you say na walay clarity ang atong direction and we have no direction sa atong the way we implement things here?
Well, like clarity, why direction? Because there's no we don't think for us. We really don't think for ourselves. And I'm and yeah, like okay, we could blame a lot of this to corruption or whatever, but does that mean that we're just doomed because we don't see more bit of what is our role in this? What is the role of like our profession in this problem? What is the role of yeah or our industry in this problem? And what is the role of our profession in this industry? And what is the role of me in this industry? In what way am I part of the problem? If I'm just doing what everyone else is doing because that is the norm, then that is deeply problematic, diba? Because the norm is already problematic.
Yeah. And I guess blame po ni mo especially when people are pushing this kanang more capitalist type of growing our career. Like get
Yeah.
projects, as many
Right.
projects as you can, get as many padako ni mong office, 'di ba? Get X
Yeah.
number of employees and then they get rewards for it. May nga na.
Yeah. It's the same kind of value system translated into many different forms, you know? Whether if you're the developer, whether if you're an architect, yeah, exactly like that. Now, murag, I don't know. I could not murag bitaw ko I wa na jud ko ni at any UAP, any whatever one di na jud ko agwanta like kay giluon na jud ko. Sorry. But yeah, mura bitaw in my mind, what are we so proud about? Mura bitaw kanang we're doing such a great job, guys, great job. Look at our, look at, look at how great we're doing our profession and whatever. And then magig-away ta sa contractor, magig-away ta sa engineer. Like, what did we do right? You know? This is one of the reasons when I quit social media. Murag kong na-hermit kay murag, my God, wala jud ko ka agwanta. So yeah, I just did my own thing.
Mhm. Yeah, even like ako kung mag-social media ko, like I just read that very top post and that's it. Like dili na ko mo log in balik sa Facebook.
Yeah,
Kapoy, like it's
murag,
really yeah.
yeah. Muna na akong the maximum dosage of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? It's good to know na murag I'm impressed na as early as say early 20s pa nimo. You already had this murag sentiments no na you really want to muhawa na ka ani na system.
Yeah. Mahawa na ko ani na system. It's not aligned to who I want to be, who I am and who I want to be. And I wanted to be an architect, but if this is what it means, then forget it. So, what you go? It's really like a long path of finding myself and finding out what I want to be. Nga na ba? And yeah, I had a good day job. That was a good job, like working in government, but that's still not my passion. That's still not related to sustainability or whatever. So, you know what I would do? All my extra time, my extra free time, I would spend it in the library or reading or studying because I realized that I had to unlearn what I was taught and I have to teach myself again. Because if wala pa ni, if this is not yet mainstream, then I don't know. I have to learn. I have to find it. I have to search for it. And I realized like maybe it's not enough if I just, I find it in the architectural section and I have to go elsewhere. I learn it in agriculture, in ecology, in psychology, in education, in quantum physics. Ingana ba? Diin na
Baka,
lang.
yeah.
Yeah.
Kibaw ka yan, Marag. I think, well, again, I'm impressed na you realized this at an 20s pa ako. It came to me mga 30s, actually. But, you know what? The same thing akong sentiments. The upon interviewing pod kaning mga architects, dapan ka ng marag di introspect ko kaning sa mga industry na to. Makaingon ko like I'm not learning anything if I just study architecture alone.
Mhm.
Well, same sa imuha mo to. I made a podcast. Ang reason gana I want to do this is to like get some insights and learn pod from people. Okay, like if I consider people na marag there are marag unsa may tawag na like nodes of like getting knowledge kay kamo like example sa imuha na kay daghan na information. So I can extract or learn from you po, di ba? And sakto to mo gingon like it's not dili ra sa architecture as well. Like I do interviews with scientists, mga artists. I'm delving into mga philosophy because
Yeah.
kind of that deep type of thinking very important kay na like in doing our kaning architecture. But sa imo hayan since katong pag na after sa government I guess ni stop na kaato na work and then you made your own firm na or
I did
what was
it.
the
I
uh,
did. I did it as like my alter ego. So I did. I would do that during the day, and then at nights and weekend, searching, searching on my own to figure out what I want to do. So because I didn't want to quit yet until I know what I want to do, and then murag naa na traction. Um, and then finally, I think 2013, I came across this book which basically changed my whole paradigm of thinking about architecture. And it also introduced the word regenerative to me for the first time, which is a big deal because I knew na at that point sustainability as we know it is very tapao. And I feel like we just throw it around, and when we think that sustainability equals materials like using green materials or
oh yeah.
passive design or green rating systems, murag, I think there's a lot
Yeah,
more
it's
to that.
a it's like it's a dumb trend na. It's become a trend na
Yeah,
marag
and the world and with the world that we're heading towards, it's not enough if we're just gonna settle with that.
right.
So this concept of regeneration is literally beyond that. It's allowing the project to achieve its highest good, its highest potential in service of the greater whole. That is like the almost exact opposite of how we think now. Because sorry to say, sometimes architecture or projects are very selfish because it's just catering to,
Yes.
its own need. And at most, if they're concerned about its impact, so fine, let's get a green rating certification or something like that para po na mabutang sa na plaka na mabutang sa wall. But we're talking about projects that are very extremely generous because they think of the project within as a subset of a bigger system that is beyond itself, you know? And these are systems like the environment or social systems or economic systems or industries. How can one project be like an acupuncture point of goodness across all these systems so that there is systemic like catalytic change? So when I came across that concept, murag me ting like this is it. This is what I want to learn. This is what I want to do. Um, but it took a lot of unlearning, good, and still trying to really understand what this means. And also, I decided to take my master's to learn even more. So I took my master's at the National University of Singapore. That was on integrated sustainable design. I thought I would learn it there, but it's still not yet what I was looking for.
Really.
So it's not. It's not.
Yeah,
I
in
also
what way na it wasn't what you were looking for?
Sometimes I feel that our approach to um, design and even sustainability is as if we are tinkering around mechanical systems, even if we're working with natural systems. Mura bitaw, okay, here are the water systems and here are the energy systems, the food systems, and let's integrate it in a way that comes up with a holistic solution. You could do that and come up with a very green building, but still there's no soul, there's no
Mm-hmm.
life.
Right.
It's very, if you think about,
Objectifying the kind of
yeah,
approach.
it's the same. You think about it, let's think about it this way. I could either look at you as a skeletal system and a muscular system and cardiovascular system, and that's all I see you, right? But not Lionel as like a whole human
Right.
being with a soul. It's the same way we think about projects, if you think about it. Like
Yes. Yes.
projects as
Agree.
a physical object versus projects as a catalyst of human life or human transformation or catalyst for life, you know? Those are two different things and two completely different ways of thinking. And I feel that this other way of thinking of projects being like containers of possible catalytic life is something that has a unique energy that could really that will create like what about impact beyond the physical.
Metaphysical na in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. But we're taught in terms of like walls and beams and
Right, right. Mo po na akong giapas, I'm also into kanang mga foundational ideas bitaw, yan. Na murag we don't usually I think there are levels now na people just stop at the level of kanang design.
Mhm.
And I think based sa imong gisulti, like it's really far deeper than that. Na murag it
Yeah.
has igingon a soul. I think
Yeah.
it has kanang murag integrity,
Yeah.
'di ba? Na murag yeah, it's hard to put into words, I guess.
Yeah.
Pero I kind of get
So
what you're trying to say. Yeah.
yeah. So the past many years was me trying to not even codify, but put my mind together in terms of what this even is. Because back in the day, this whole notion of regenerative design is not even mainstream. Right? Like we're not even talking about Philippines, but all over the world, not a lot of people are thinking about it because people are stuck at sustainability. And then they move up, they level up gamay into net zero, which is net zero energy system. So it's still about, technology to some extent. And then ni-level up gamay pag yun when people started to realize that, oh, we actually have to restore and repair the damage that's already been done. So all of a sudden there are NGOs everywhere that are doing restoration work when there was not a lot of that before. But then ultimately the highest level of all of that is truly regenerative design and development. That's where I want to operate from. And that is like literally the basis of my work now. Yeah.
Pero can you like in maybe in simple terms para makasabot po ng kanang whoever's gonna listen, what is like regenerative design and the difference between katong ordinary na sustainable the design?
Sustainable design is about how to do less harm, how to create a lesser footprint. That's why we're thinking of like, okay, let's use LED lighting because it uses up less energy. Let's use this material because it has less toxins or something like that. We're thinking about doing less because building or doing projects creates a harmful impact. But when you are working from a regenerative paradigm, you are not just doing less. You actually want to do more. You are not wanting to minimize your footprint. You're wanting to maximize your positive footprint. So you don't think of like how can I build in a way na murag wala kay waste or things like that. You're thinking of like how can my project actually literally contributes to the highest good of this place, of this community, in this industry, or whatever systems it touch. You have to literally flip the script. But that means that we have to start thinking of how can we, as professionals, start to mura bitaw, we don't look within, we don't look na murag ang atong iserve is ang client ra, but really the whole world, nature, community, and all of that, and start expanding bitaw our worldview na mura bitaw everything that we do is to be generous to the larger systems. So Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. And this is kind of like to summarize our like our design methodology or our design philosophy. Number one is we always start from unique potential. And this in itself is already what makes sustainability different from regenerative design. Otherwise, mura bitog ang bata imo cookie cutter na okay dapat mo ni mong grade or whatever the same sa green building, you know. You have to make sure na standardized na dapat green gold rated or whatever. So instead of thinking like that, we start to think of like what is the potential of this place actually? If the project is in Carmen, Bohol, or Mandaue, Cebu, or whatever, wherever it is, every place, just like a project, holds a unique potential and a unique blueprint, you know? Everything is about energy if you think about it. So if we look at if we think of a project as a subset of a larger place, and that place has potential, then that's where we work first. So instead of like magsugod so like okay and sa my design program ani and I start thinking of spaces or whatever, we don't do that yet. We really understand holistically what this place is, what is the story of this place, what are its unique challenges, but also what could it be in the same way that we're trying to, like, you have a daughter,
Yes, two
yeah,
daughters.
yeah, two
Yes.
daughters, in the same way that you would always want to nurture your own daughters to reach their highest potential, right?
Right.
In the same way, we would want to nurture every place around the world for every place to reach its highest potential. So if this place is struggling now, like Cebu City is really deteriorated, or or somewhere in Bohol na walay water security, whatever, people are living in poverty. I don't want to focus on the problem. I want to focus on what it could be in a way that is really unique to that place. So we do a lot of intensive mapping, understanding from the very beginning, like more about the essence of as if it's a person, like under like that's why you would nurture perhaps your two daughters differently kay lahi, di ba?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to go through that own study, understanding like the geology, the hydrology, ecology, the social cultural history, industries of that place, the problems of that place, so that makakita ta like, oh, mo day ni ang history, ang trajectory, mo day naabot diri na point.
Yes.
But because of its whole history, we could also see like from here on, we could either move downwards. Now it's just gonna get worse from here, or it could go up to this, this unique highest potential that is only unique to this place. Only once we know that and klaro kayong vision, then we think about the project. Only then do we think about the project, because then the project, even if we don't know exactly yet what it is, it already started with the beautiful intention, right? That the intention is for this project, even if it's one project, to help the place reach its highest potential. That's what we're not doing. So, yeah.
Pero kada sa imong study like usually yan like how long and that say mga need na involved sa research ninyo? Like what are the things that you actually do?
How long we manage, because we streamline na mo, more bit we codified the methodology. I think it could just take a few weeks. It could take a few weeks. The other thing that we're doing is that we are also really building up our GIS mapping capabilities, so that dali ra bitaw kaayo to get data and then put it on maps, put it in layers that we could start to understand patterns. So yeah, what was the other question?
Unsa pa yung mga methods that you do in like this understanding the social cultural mga history economy?
So we do it systematically. First is it's almost really like understanding a place as if it's a person. Have you ever thought about why places are called like that? There's already a lot of things that you could learn from that actually. Like for example, Carmen Bohol was called Carmen because this whole Catholic Marianne whatever was also centered there. But before that, it was called Imbaya because of a stream that was running there. That is already a clue. Oh, what is a stream? And why is it important? Why is it significant? Is that stream still there? Because if a place is called after a stream, then that means that that stream is probably important to that place's identity, diba? What if that
Right,
stream is
right.
gone? Yan na ba? And it's the same. It's the same for many. For example, Cebu, Sugbo. Sugbo means to wade into the water. A lot of the words we have, even sinulog, sulog, which is the flow of the river current, actually tells us a lot that we have deep ties with water. The fact na, the coast of Cebu was so shallow you could just wade into it, or na ang kaning atong sinulog na dance was so important that literally until now, we are mimicking the flow of water. I just don't know how many Cebuanos still know that that is actually the original meaning. So from the name Palangdaan, we now understand more bit of a small clue of what that place is, who that place is, and then we start to look at like, okay, based on these initial findings, including sources from like official government sources, what do they say about themselves, or when you think about Cebu, what do people think about, like Mingo or Lechon or Magellan's Cross or whatever? Those are already clues to point you in certain aspects to look deeper in, whether if it's geology, hydrology, history or things like that. Then Diha Memo follows down the breadcrumbs. Once we do that, and then we literally map it, we could start to see patterns. Sometimes we could understand history theoretically lang, like, oh, okay, mo day na ingani katong ingani. But once you map it, like you do visual physical mapping, you could start to understand like, mo day diri ni landing. Or no wonder this is where they do their settlements. It's because they want to settle near the water. It's because we used to be people of water, and so diha ta ni settle, and that's also why the churches are there. Murag diha na magkatay-katay ba? Once we see the patterns, then kanina patterns will become very important because those are the same patterns that we will start designing with. Right now, we're not designing with any patterns. We don't even understand topography. We don't even understand how water flows. Do you see how deeply problematic that is in a place that, is so easily flooded? If we don't understand the broader context, if Asat has a watershed, even understand, do people even know which river they're contributing to? No. If you think about it, but how do we even hope to be resilient if we don't even understand these broader the patterns, these patterns, if we don't even know which watershed we belong to, which river we contribute to. If we think that water is just something that flows in our taps and then it just magically disappears into our drains, out of sight, out of mind, because we as architects, we were just taught to, like, as long as the water connects to the drain, that's it. That's someone else's problem now. Then how are we ever gonna solve this problem? That's why we have to look at the broader systems, and we really, really need to understand it so that we understand how we're currently contributing to the problem. Otherwise, nothing will ever change. And then it's just all finger pointing.
But I guess nakoy sa base sa imong post yan that you mentioned na important yun ang water systems, the watersheds. You even mentioned na we build our sa to ang pag delineation sa mga cities based on sa mga watershed. What made you say na important
Okay.
ang watershed systems gid?
All right. This is not technically my own. This is not an idea that is unique to me. When I was studying other fields and whatnot, one of the key bodies of knowledge that really deeply influenced me is permaculture. So permaculture actually means permanent culture or permanent agriculture. It was devised by this Australian called Bill Mollison in the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. Basically, the even the agriculture system since after the World War is also deeply extractive, right? It's not just a built environment, so we're depleting our soils or whatever. So he was wandering through the Australian Tasmanian forest and seeing the abundance of nature. basically his question was like, how can we create human systems, including agricultural systems, that are as abundant and as resilient as nature systems? Long story short, permaculture is a design thinking and also an agricultural system that that mura bitawag, that designs according to how nature designs and how nature works, really working with nature. It requires prolonged observation because you can't know something unless you have a relationship with it. So you have to really know how to observe land, observe nature, and then interact with it so that you have a relationship with it, trial and error, and all of that. Um, in in broad scale landscape permaculture, there is this thing called scale of permanence, which means if you have the choice between tackling, if mag-una kang tackle of roads or water systems or forestry systems or whatever, there are some things that you have to do first. There are some things that you have to tackle first before the rest. Otherwise, magsigig balik-balik. Okay, there are just some systems that are more important than others, and water is one of them. Like, even let's just think about roads. Let's assume that let's build a city. Let's do it do it like Daniel Burnham or like the Garden City movement or whatever, and then let's just draw very very nice straight like boulevards and whatnot, and just completely erasing the natural the natural patterns of water. Kay gusto ta na straight, gusto ta na grid para limpyo. Then we're altering the natural hydrology of the land, and we don't think that actually water also carries, sorry, roads also carry water. So wherever we're building roads, we're also redirecting water kay na po diha. I mean, it captures a lot of water, a hard surface man na, and then diha po dang drain. So not only are you not following if unsa ang blueprint, but you're also altering it in a way na nasamot og kaguba ang natural na blueprint. Whereas if we start with water first, and that means that we have to start with understanding the landscape, the shape of the land first. Okay, water will always follow the shape of the land. That's why we're talking of these catchments. And then we design according to that first. Mag-una sa ata, let's design for water across the whole landscape. Dili ira water in the rivers and streams kay mao na ang makita, but water actually belongs in the entire landscape. In fact, the landscape becomes more resilient if we put water back to where it belongs. So that means na now where it falls up in the mountains, in the soils, if the soils were healthier, if vegetation was denser, then mura bitaw water could have gone back by design na it's slowed by soil, slowed by vegetation, slowed by forest, and then cleanse, recharge, go back to the aquifers and then come out as springs. Maunta na ang by design. But no, we only think about the water na makita nato, which is in the drains,
Surface
in the
water, yeah.
rivers, in the surface water, in our taps and whatever. We see water as a mechanical system and not a natural system. And that in itself is deeply problematic. So if nisunod pa lang ta sa patterns of water and patterns of land, imagine we could have designed roads to our advantage, right? We could have designed roads to collect and harvest water, and then we could have redirected this water into these collection ponds or wetlands or something. Um, and then it would have been part of a larger system. And then we could even like align roads in ridges so that it is always dry, not like now na sometimes we there are roads that permi lang magbaha because of course that's a naturally low-lying area. Infrastructure pa lang daan, it would have been resilient sa sinugdanan pa lang if we had just designed for water first. Then then ang kaning dual ka system, water and blue should always come hand in hand. Always. Because if it is a blue system, but we want it to be water, but from a nature point of view, there has to be the natural component. Otherwise, it's going to be another gray infrastructure. So if we're going to be, designing for ponds or dams or whatever. It should be an opportunity to inject nature there. Okay, nature would function as a sponge. It could absorb any excess water beyond the capacity of the pond. So giunaw ta to blue and green together. If and then roads, that would have been our mainframe, our what do we talk, the backbone of our whole planning, and it would have made the city very very resilient. Not only resilient but also green. Could have survived droughts, could have survived floods. Kay tungod sakto pagka-design ng backbone. Everything else should follow after that. None of this nonsense na giuna ang zoning or giuna ang roads or giuna ang whatever. If we're gonna continue to expand, Cebu City to the other outskirts, okay, wala puno na, wala na space, and then we're gonna follow the same planning models. Then we're just gonna export the same problems, diba, to new cities. And then we're talking about connecting Cebu and Bohol via bridge. Like, please don't, please, please don't export all of these problems out into areas like Bohol that are still pristine. That's why, magsige jud kog balik-balik na, unahon na gini na, we have to fix our mindset first. Because forget about solving any problem, forget about, doing them here, whatever. If we don't solve the way we think, we're just gonna end up with the same problems, and now we're at the tipping point. That's what I meant by, yeah, all those things I said in my post, basically.
Right. Katong giingon nimo yan ba na building katong like what we're doing right now, maghimot ang mga roads and dili sakto ang pag-divert sa water. Where exactly ang ato ba ginalabay ni ang mga water instead of katong sa in the proper places basically?
First of all, why are we throwing water?
Mhm.
Why do we treat water like waste? You know? Why? That's the first thing that I want to address right away. Why are we treating water as waste? Before we even talk about drainage, let's talk about what happens on site. So I made a post about Singapore and how even they are realizing drainage is not enough. Bear in mind that rainfall in Singapore, Philippines is pretty much the same. There used to be massive floods in Singapore, hundreds of I think if my data is correct. Yeah, there used to be massive floods in Singapore. And mind you, infrastructure in Singapore is very, very good. Like some of their drains are as big as highways. That's how big their drains are. But still, the agency in charge of water, PUB, Public Utility Board, stated that with climate change and increasingly erratic rainfall and heavier volume rainfall, it's not realistic if we're going to keep upsizing our drains. We have to tackle it at the parcel scale, which means we need to address water if asa siya mo land, which is really at the individual site. Right now, we're not even thinking about that. At most, like, okay, maybe we're promoting some rainwater catchment, rainwater harvesting. If puno na siya, if your tank is already full and then magbagyo, more gyapon, di ba? That's still excess water that will go
Limited
there.
ra ang yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, or hardly anything. That's why Singapore has a mandatory on-site detention law that states na if your site is bigger than 2,000 square meters or zero point 0.2 hectares, you have to detain water on your site so that dili mapundo, dili ma-overwhelm ang drain. So because because Singapore is also water scarce and water is also, water is like a precious resource, they made the most of it. They not only harvested like every last drop of water, and then it goes into one of their 17 reservoirs so that the city has something to drink. Okay, hapit naman maputol ang ilang contract with Malaysia, which means that they won't be having any external water coming in. So they are harvesting all that water, and then any excess water, beyond some harvest, they are also what about integrating it in nature-based solutions on site. They're making it part of the landscape. So it might look like, there's a pond, but it's actually now a landscape or ecological feature. And and developers are actually embracing this because it also increases, like, the attractiveness of their projects. There's a lot of nature on their projects. All of this is just increasing the amount of nature that is growing in the city. So before, yeah, before even thinking about the water that goes into the road, it is tackled first and foremost at the partial scale. Everyone has to do it. Now, when it comes to the road, there are also other ways of slowing it down, because even at the infrastructure level, we could still also introduce blue-green infrastructure so that Dili Raja Road, and this is where, like, concepts like WSUD or water sensitive urban design comes in, because even the side strip planting, that could also harvest water, it could clean water, it could slow down water, so that mo recharge siya para gamay na lang gamay na lang mo awas. If asa siya mo awas, if we had followed Singapore, all those drains are actually leading to reservoirs. Two-thirds of Singapore is a catchment. Again, water scarce man. So they are harvesting every last of as much water that they could, and it's leading to one of their 17 reservoirs. I think most of them are man-made, just so that they could harvest all that water. That's the biggest difference, because now we're thinking that water is waste. Tanawa lang, next El Nino, I'm gonna talk about desalination. So yeah, again, it's a mindset problem.
Yes. Just to be clear, ang kaning water sa Singapore, how do they plan to use it? Like, is it gina-filter
Filtered.
nila para mainom na eventually?
Yes, yes, yes.
Wow.
It is so they call it like a four national taps. In the 1960s, bear in mind that Singapore was a slum. So it was a third world country, and there was no it's an island, so wala natural water reserves. They don't have a watershed, it's an island, There's no waterfalls, no nothing. Um no sanitation either. People lived in slums. And so they were literally reliant on Malaysia for water. So they signed a contract which will expire in 2060, I think. After ana, wala na. So they created this four national taps program to make Singapore water secure. So the first is the first is still that water from Malaysia, kay naa pa man na. The second is rainwater, all the water that falls on Singapore, just two-thirds of Singapore, but I think they're gonna increase it to 90% of Singapore. All that is harvested. Even Marina Bay, that is a reservoir. Eventually will be cleaned for drinking water. Then the third is desalination. The fourth is new water. New water is basically reclaimed sewage water.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. When that was introduced, people were like, "What?" So the minister, like, on public, like, drank it to show na, like, so that was one of the the main nationwide issues that they had to tackle, right? But Lee Kuan Yew being he had such foresight. What about where will Singapore's economy come from? You will have to attract. If you're a small city state, you will have to attract foreign investors. Back then, it was a slum. What foreign investor would want to come here? That's why in the 1960s pa lang, he's already promoting this garden city vision, Singapore being a city in a garden, the importance of nature, because he realized that only when a city is green, clean, when the people are disciplined, will foreigners want to come and invest, because it's like a safe, clean, it's a stable city. It will also help with discipline. I also think that that's the reason why we're so undisciplined, because hugaw naman daan, all our infrastructure is very ugly, very not well done. There's no impetus for us to maintain anything if there's nothing beautiful to maintain. But if we had built infrastructure, if we had built our cities to have a lot of nature, to have parks, and I think that would change the psychology of people a little bit, because at least we would have a sense of pride in our environment, and we're I think a lot of people are already very environmentally minded anyway, then there's something to preserve. So as Singapore in the beginning started na 1960s sa Balangdaan, this city in Garden City, and then they keep achieving their milestone. So then after Garden City was City in a Garden, and then after that was a city of gardens and water, so integrating water. And then now ang ilang vision is to become a city in nature. So if I look around, wa pa sila nahuman og tanom. They will always find spaces to densify planting. And this is what I want to circle back to ang ilahang water strategy. So I was mentioning, diba, na all those drains, those are hard infrastructure, by the way. Those are all concrete drains in the beginning. And it was necessary, diba, because it was collecting water from like the whole island leading to the reservoir. So you would see all these huge canals that are channeling water. If you're gonna follow that water, it's gonna go to the reservoir. But because Singapore also wants to be a city in nature, and as I mentioned before, remember, if they have a national vision, it will trickle down to every single relevant government agency. So that vision of being city in nature also trickled down into the water strategy, which means that they wanted to naturalize, in order for to move towards their vision, they wanted to naturalize these canals. And that's why ever since then, past few years, some of them are being naturalized, some of them being broken down, or they're almost like they don't look like canals anymore. They're starting to look like rivers. So the exact opposite of what we're doing. They are turning their canals into rivers and public parks and linear parks so that we expand ang ilang park system as part of being a city in nature. And then naturalizing all of this and integrating natural cleaning through biotopes, which means like the plants do the cleaning so that sa where the water falls palangdaan, the water is already cleaned and it'll turn even more and more clean leading towards the reservoir so that lesser na lang kaayo ang cleaning needing to be done in order for it to be potable. Compare that back in the day when Singapore rivers were literally so polluted and slums and all that. So it's completely doable on top.
Yun sa nila pag-convert aning concrete yan, like what is it made of? Kaning mga naturalized na drains? Like just gravel
Well,
and
it will depend. It will also depend on the space. So there's this one very like a best case example. It's called Bishan Park. So Bishan Park was already an existing park, and then there's this concrete canal that goes across its entire along its entire length. Um, I think it was carrying the outflow from one of the reservoirs, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, concrete concrete channel. But because it was set in a park, that means that you have more space to play with, you know? So in that particular example, they just completely removed the the concrete embankment and then ilabitaw gihimog gentler ang slope so that it functions and looks more and more like a river. If there is heavy rainfall, it will flood, but it's flooded by design. It was meant to flood. Because the naturalized river is now able to hold 30 to 40% more. It now has 30 to 40% more flood capacity compared to if it was a concrete drain. One of the problems of concrete drain because it's so rigid, there's no more extra volume for that water to go. So whatever ang usik ana, of course it's gonna overflow, but nature is more forgiving. um, so there could have been mura bitaw, okay, if we had this much rainfall, it could overflow up until here. If napadjud, it could flow up until here. Ingana ba? It's by design. Not only that, it's softer and rougher so that mahinay actually velocity of water, which is so important because if you're gonna make the embankments of river hard, what's gonna happen? It's just gonna increase the velocity of water, right? That is what makes water deadly. Fast water is what kills. Kay paspas man kayo. Paspas and high volume because the river is treated as a pipe, as like a canal. It's not functionally like how nature would do it, na gipahinay, gipatuyok-tuyok, and most importantly gipahinay, gidissipate ba ang power sa tubig. So that is one example of how one park does it. In other cases, in other parts of Singapore, if wala pa, if there's not enough space, they would maybe do like gabions or like rock, kana mga encaged rock embankments para lang we could soften it up. If we just need to think of this, like how to naturalize it in a way that increases the flood capacity, cleans it, and also slows it down to make it function more and more like a river. So different drains, different strategies depende sa ilahang context,
No, nindot no na ang ilang inspiration kay from the nature itself. Pero
which it should be. Yeah.
yeah, should be. Kaning before I want to go back lang sa context sa Cebu, but just so we could follow yan. Kaning mention mo na blue and green structures, like what are these necessarily?
Okay. Blue is water. Green is like nature or vegetation, and so we so in terms of nature-based solutions, but especially in terms of the city or urban areas, we talk a lot about blue-green infrastructure, so that it's not just gray infrastructure. See, gray is a color. We're just thinking in terms of gray, so that's why blue and green are other alternative colors that were also introduced to show bana. Hey, let's not just think of gray, but there's also blue systems, which is water systems, but most importantly, blue and green systems, which is water and nature together. When I was looking through, I think on the DSHUD development guidelines, so they do have like CLUP guidelines, and then I think they have published newer guidelines on like building resilient cities or introducing open space, how to introduce open space. They talked a little bit about this. The problem is that ilag is separate. So they're like, okay, these are blue spaces and green spaces and then gray open spaces. Like, why are we separating them? Especially in contexts like the Philippines, when most likely blue and green are always together. Think about mangroves. Think about wetlands. Think about coasts. Think about our rivers. Those should be integrated, blue and green. So if we had thought about our rivers in that way, usapad ni. Remember I was mentioning a lot of this is by design because of codes. You know about the 3 meter easement. This water code man na siya. So the easement is basically to protect the river and also to allow for public access. And then depending if it is within forest or agriculture or urban, maglain-lain ng width. So forest I believe is 20 meters buffer or easement. Agriculture ano to? Is something less, I forgot. And then but most importantly, urban areas is 3 meters. Okay? Let's think about what will happen if we if we design code like policies like that. Where are cities usually located? It's usually located at downstream of rivers, right? That means the river, I mean, this is the part where the water or river is already pretty wide, and then you put only a 3 meter easement. Kana ra? What do you think developers would do? They're gonna build a boundary wall, and then they would turn their back towards the river because they want to face the road, because we are very road centric. And then yeah, drainage and whatever will go towards the
Labay.
river. So labay, and it will become a no man's land because what do we think will happen in that 3 meters na naay linear forest na magically mo tunga diya? No, it's gonna turn into no man's land because that's not accessible anyway. So of course that's where informal settlers will settle because they need spaces to settle. This is no man's land because it's easement, and the developers or landowners are turning their back anyway. So just designing the code like that, you're effectively turning rivers into sewers because we're treating it like that. If we had reversed it, na gibalian ta to na in cities, we should have had like 20-meter buffer at least, for example, and then mandate that that buffer should be like a blue green park or public space, then that would have been drastically different. That would have been like a resilience infrastructure for the whole city, plus public space, plus cleaning the air, among many other things. You could also integrate it with bike paths and slower mobility and all of that. It's everything is good for the city. It will also create economic value because people want to hang out in parks, and so you could put commercial areas. Yeah, yeah, ba. If we had thought of it as integrated blue green, blue green gray, na designed to flood at various levels. Now, if 5-year flood designed to flood at this level, um 25-year flood at this level, 100-year, ingana, ingana, then we could have ended up with cities that would have been very different, especially in Cebu. Okay, Cebu, unlike Manila, name the if we're gonna name the rivers of Manila, Pasig, Marikina. But Cebu has multiple rivers tungod sa atong geography because ridge to reef. So of course there will be parallel rivers that run from the ridge all the way to the coast, meaning all of those could have been linear public parks, but they're not. They're sewers. Yeah. So that's what I mean by blue green infrastructure. This is even more powerful because if you look at it from uh if you really combine blue and green, it creates all other kinds of benefits and ecosystem services, including cleaning water. You could
Yes.
integrate biotopes or constructed wetlands or whatever, so that imo ipadaga ng tubig diha, you run through stormwater there. As it flows throughout this park, you could gradually clean it. It will come out cleaner than before. That is already one of the benefits, in addition to providing shade and cleaning and all of that, all of that. So many cool benefits opposed as opposed to just flood wall or
Right.
something.
And then so diha ta mo you said na diha ta mag-start gid sa mga sa water systems nato, the blue-green systems. Katong giingon nimo na 'di ba we set the boundaries of the city from there. Once we establish that yan, like how do we go from there naman? Like sa roads and then after that, let's
Yeah,
say
I think
development
I
na.
think I think we need to relook at uh, zoning and zoning ordinances, especially residential. I think even in the way uh, we write we design our zones, it's it's very single use. If it's very single use, it also encourages like low density sprawl, like mga R1 or whatever na mura bitaw these very subdivisions na ay wag ko kabawon sa ano pag-describe. We are basically encouraging sprawl and single use so that we're occupying a lot of land, and then we have to take a car to go somewhere else to run our errands. Everything should be mixed use. It should be mixed use, but it could be predominantly residential or predominantly commercial or whatever, depending if asa na dapit, and we should aim for a higher density. This is the only way to this is the only way to allow cities to breathe, which means that we allow for more GFA, but we free up more land. Dili sa karon na unsa kaninang mga residential codes like kanang BP 220 and PD 957
Mhm.
or ingana, which stipulates only 30% open space. If you stipulate only 30% open space, but also encourage low density sprawl development, where will that open space go? It's going to go to roads. Almost all of that 30% open space is going to go to roads. So that open space is not it's not going to end up for humans to enjoy. It's for cars to drive around. If we stipulate if we mura bitaw imbis mura bitaw gilaray na bitaw or mura spread out ang residential development, we stack it up, we make it medium rise, or for example, or we increase the density so that we could fit in more people per area, but also increase, the amount of green space, which is also functional, also integrate with blue green infrastructure. That would make for a more resilient city. Unta. And we should do this for all major important tawag gani, zones and typologies, but especially for residential. At the very least, I think places of work should be close to where people live. Places of work where people go to, where kids go to school, where people live. That should have been designed more bitog as something that is very convenient, walkable, public transport, and all of that. So ang kaning where people live and the neighborhood facilities that should go with it. This includes their groceries or markets or schools, even churches. Um, I really, really believe that all of that could have been walkable if ni sunod pa ta aning, like, nature as a background. And then you could have walked to school, could have walked to church, and then if everything was mixed use, then that means na it's not like some towns bitaw na murag as far as your eyes can see puro residential. Then there could have also been like commercial or retail or something, or office spaces that also would be places of work. Then that would have meant that where people lived and where people worked would have been closer together. Then let's tackle industry, because I think industrial, okay, when we did the mapping sa Mandaue as part of this study, naibong nalimitan na, wow, grabe, this is just so scattered. Or bitaw, na-factory day, na-factory diha, na-factory day, na-factory diha. And then in between our communities that are cut off from nature or whatever, mura sila naipit ba in between these tawag ni, these industries. All industries, I believe that they should have been industrial estates. There could be some industrial estates that are clean tech. There could be industrial estates that are more heavier, or whatever. There could be estates based on certain themes. This is also something that Singapore does really well. Okay, again, in the beginning, um, they're trying to build up their local economy. One way to do that is also industry. So they literally build up an agency to take care of all the industries in Singapore. Now their industrial estates are so green, really so green. Literally, there could be like an ecological park in the middle of it. And then it's connected to the other buildings. They're connected by this blue-green spine or whatever. Ang sa ato, apart from tawag na maps, it's pretty scattered. It's also taking up a lot of space. Like even ang kanang mga industry, like think of kanang sa North Reclamation, kana bitong atbang sa SM. Some of those are like warehouses or storage. All of that is actually prime land. Um, so all of that could have been consolidated and put somewhere else, and some turned into clean industries. So yeah, long story short, design cities and communities to be walkable so that things could have been within reach, or walkable, bikeable, or whatever. Places of work and places of residence could be closer together, so mixing use, and then clean up clean up industrial. Long story short, our zoning and the codes related to zoning also need a major overhaul, because after we fix our river systems, the rest of the problem is sprawl. That's also why we don't have a lot. Think about our cities. Where are our parks? Where are our
Mao
open
gyud ang
spaces?
kulang sa yeah, exactly. Mao gyud na akong na-notice sa Cebu, like we really need parks here sa city itself, 'di ba?
Wala.
You have to go far away para makakuha ng
So if you have to go far away in order to breathe, and then if you could afford, you might as well think like, oh, I might as well build a house here. So because nature is becoming so sparse, nature na supposedly could protect, they're now under peril because people want to move or build near them. Kay dili na ka, you can't breathe in cities. In the meantime, we have designers our cities and zoning and all of that to discourage parks. We also cannot blame developers because okay, okay, they are to blame to some extent, but you think of it from the developer's point of view. Every developer will just try to maximize every square inch that they could get. So if unsa ang allowed by code, if they could build 70%, but di ra pud kutob, ilag yun na tilokon. And the rest will go to parking so that they could get more customers and all of that. So mabitaw dili na to i-anticipate ba, like how I wish we had planned or designed codes to anticipate the worst form of human behavior. You know, we should have designed codes assuming that they would build the worst version of that policy of that code, right? Then isa pa na to ang baseline. We could have just set codes to just mandate higher open space and higher green spaces. This is another thing that Singapore is doing really well because that they are trying to move towards city and nature, and they don't have much land. So and then they need to develop and they need to cater to more people. They have something called a landscape replacement requirement, which is also mandatory for some typologies, I believe. Which means now, if you occupy a certain area of land, you have to replace the greenery of that certain amount. And in some cases, developers also see the value of increasing nature. They would go above and beyond. So asa man na nila ibutang, where are they going to replace it, diba? Sometimes they would green their roof. Sometimes
Right.
they're going to green their walls. Sometimes they would insert like sky gardens, or they would green their podiums. They just sometimes you maglako-lako ka in the city. It's like they're inserting nature in every last nook and cranny asa pwede mapasok. But it is also because of policy. That's the importance of policy. If there's two or three policies that I wish Philippines or Cebu would follow, it's those three. Number one, mandatory detention. Number two, mandatory landscape replacement, which means that you have to replace the nature that you have, were destroyed or you've taken up. And third is this mandatory amount of green and open and green space. Open space that translates to green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pero kaning mandatory na kaning replacement of nature, it's not as effective gyapon, 'di ba, as kanang untouched nature gyapon. So marag like if you place a sky garden, it's not going to be as effective if you just leave an
Of
open
course not.
space like it.
Of course not. But I'm talking about the urban areas here.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about areas that should be what bitaw nature reserve. Lahi na siya. So that's why let's make the clarification between nature zoned as nature versus everything else. Or they're not saying as if like, okay, you could take an area that is supposed to be forest or zoned as forest as long as you replace that with, I don't know, grass or whatever. No, they still have untouched and increasing secondary forests. These are now secondary forests. Okay, but in zones that are even commercial, especially commercial, it's in the middle of the city. Ang green replacement is not the forest; it's the land. It's just the land. So even if walay green diha, even if it's just like an empty parcel of land, what they're saying is that you should replace the equivalent of that area of land, not forest. In the case of the Philippines, it should be both, which means that there has to be areas that are reserves for forests and wetlands and all of these, true nature, because you could never ever ever replace that. But also there should be scope to even increase nature and greenery even in private development so that people don't feel the need to occupy those spaces that are untouched nature because there's already nature and greenery in the city.
Pero yan katong Kanang question lang ba, katong giingon nimo da, 'di ba, we try to introduce new, more open space. Pero on the pragmatic side, like even as a designer or even sa mga clients na mag-iiba na mo reklamo na, like say they don't want a very high building, they want to stay on the ground floor lang and maximize as much space as possible. Say work around ana yan, guys, 30%, and if you increase it, mura gamay lang kayong building footprint nimo, 'di ba?
Why would they want to be closer to the ground as possible?
I think for convenience and kanang, the building cost niya musaka pod.
That's why that's why we need to start questioning the assumptions of how we define perceived value. Maybe for now, maybe for now, we are linking higher value to convenience, especially from a very road dominant society na inig park na ko, gusto ko magawas na ako, and then mora na, so inga na ba? But what if we're moving towards, and we're quickly moving towards a very what about vulnerable situation here, where maybe those on the first floor are also the most vulnerable kay imong property damage through the roof. What if those on the first floor would also be, the most polluted and nobody want to hang out there? What if we start to reframe it so that people will actually would prefer hanging out on a podium, on a podium garden at the third story, just because that is the only last breathing space in the city. That's why we need to start reframing how we what we think about value, and how we perceive value, so that we could design accordingly. And so we can start changing the minds of developers. I think i, I think there's this predominant, maybe it's a cultural thing, where Filipino homeowners, for example, they feel the need to, when they buy a house, dapat house and lot, so that they own a piece of land. And that's why we end up with these kind of subdivision or residential development that, you know just rows and rows of housing and no open space, because everyone needs their parcel of land. At the end of the day, maybe I actually would start to think that this preference could start to change in the future, especially if cities in the Philippines will become more and more vulnerable, that maybe it is more worthwhile, or maybe even life saving, to have an apartment at the fourth story, compared to owning your own piece of land just so that you have land. I think some of this, like value systems, or again how we perceive value or what we want, will start to change soon, especially with these events like this. And I think that it should be necessary, because I don't know, this could be a personal preference, but I think I would much rather have an maybe an apartment or a walk up or whatever, if it means that I am closer to nature, and if it means that I am actually living in a very resilient development. Maybe it is even producing energy, or it is self-sufficient in terms of water. My energy bills are going down. My kids could play in the park. There could even be a clean stream, so that my kids could play in the park. Right now, we don't have any other option on good, because that's the only development model that we see, and developers are not willing to do that. In fact, fun fact, so you're familiar with Waha, right? You know Waha? Yeah. So they're actually our friends. And I when they went to Cebu, I asked them, "Do you have any projects in the Philippines?" No. And by the way, was one of the most prominent and most influential firms here in Singapore. Literally, like, they would serve on advisory boards. They represented Singapore to COP, nga na ba? And they also know about what we're doing, and they really, really support this development model in the Philippines. That's why I ask, you have any projects in the Philippines? No. But have developers approached you? Yeah, a lot. But we turn them all down because we don't agree with their development model. I'm like, no,
Right.
okay. And then, and then, and
What's
then,
their
and
Yes, yes,
then,
sige. Mhm.
and then when we were working on Cebu Studio, he informed me that, oh, there's a prominent Cebu developer who approached them, possibly wanting to do a project. If that's the case, maybe then they will work with us. So I'm like, okay, so we know who they are. And then they got back, like, okay, they got back. I think the project got a go signal. And they gave their brief, the project brief, and then they shared with us. So we studied the project brief, and oh my God, it's the same. It's the same development model that I just described. Very low density, single use, row dominant, all of that. Yan ako na. What is the point of hiring a firm as prominent as Woha, who that famously does very green, sustainable development? If you're gonna do,
Yeah, if you don't give them like
yeah,
the kwan to work
what's the
around
point of
there.
hiring a star architect? So we discussed, and we counter proposed, like, okay, we will only work on this, but only if you change your development model, and maybe it might involve, like, perhaps have to work with the city, so that, maybe we could work around some zoning regulations or something, so that this becomes a special project that will hopefully serve as like a flagship, serve as a model for other development. Well, they turned it down. So I'm like, okay, something will have to happen in order for
Yes.
either that, or there just has to be a very, very maverick, open-minded, black sheep, black
Visionary
sheep
na,
kind of
yeah.
developers, just at least
Yes,
who at
yes.
least wants to stand out, or at least wants to try something different, because the
Mm-hmm.
current model is not working. Yeah.
Yes.
Again,
And I assume katong imong gi-criticize, it's more about the kanang model na it's really profit driven to crop up as much space as you can, as many units, right?
the thing though is that we're not even saying that let's do less units. I'm not saying that. We want to actually keep the density, meaning the amount of population that we could fit in, increase it even. Our problem is in how we spatially plan it. Why do we have to spread them all thin, like one layer cake? Therefore, you're it's a waste of land, don't you think? Because you're trying to fit in. If you're gonna try to fit in as many units as you could horizontally in one layer, of course, that's like you're just occupying everything. There's no more space for open space, green space, parks, infiltration, all that. But that's not the only way to do that. But we have to think. We have to rethink. Form. This is now a planning. This is now a planning and design. The planning and design thinking behind this. This is also what we're lacking, because um sometimes when we design for, I don't know, aesthetic, or I don't know, like, we wanted to look iconic, like it should look like a bird, or I don't know, sometimes it's like literally nonsense like that.
Yeah, most. Oh my
But
god.
we should instead be performance driven. Why? Performance in terms of systems, like in terms of energy, in terms of water, in terms of ecological systems. If we should have been performance driven, so that form translates into these kind of performance. Kaya nga naman, because aesthetics is subjective, ang nindot nako bati nimo. Might as well make all projects perform, and you could do that through spatial planning.
Pero just curious katong giingon nimo na one layer. Like how would you approach it, Dayan? Like how can you explain to us like how can you fit into different layers ning mga units
I,
in a certain plot
I
of
think
land?
before I would even do that, I would do exactly what I said I would do, which is I would start with blue green systems first. Um, because number one, for all I know, that area could be a flood zone. By the way, when we were looking at these kind of developments, Labinadaka, I don't know, they tend to, there's more than one development, deca development, that happens to be on a wetland. I don't know what's up with that. So we
Right.
have to we have to understand first, like, oh, what conditions are we dealing with actually? What are the hydrological conditions? Because depending on that, that is how much space we need to give. That is how much space we need to preserve, just so that that area won't drown, or it won't cause drowning of others downstream from them. You know, if we determine that, like, okay, this there are certain areas in this land that is historically, like impounding it really receives water, it is permanently wet, and this is historically like where water will flow inga na tanan, and we understand that maybe this is even a wetland, like there are even literally subdivisions, diba, that used to be wetlands. I think some kanang duol sa San Carlos kay tungod na alter na gyud na ang hydrology diha. Once we understand that, we have some idea already of how much space we should give to blue, green, and infrastructure. That by default should be the
Primary
primary
good
good,
na
and that will be the open space. Then you could design ponds, you could design nature-based playgrounds. There could even be like, na ang mga bata magduwa-duwa sa sapa. Ingana ba? It could be very, very beautiful if you think about it. And then
quality of life
quality of
increases po, di ba?
life increases because you live in nature and everything is so green. And
Mhm.
then whatever is left, whatever, and then your buildings orient itself or harmonizes according to that. So if unsa na lang nabilin, whatever space is left there, and we have to think about, yes, we have to think about parking, but I don't believe that that's the only way, that's the only configuration. Hello, let's use our creativity here. We could use many different kinds of configurations to stack it. Maybe parking could be covered. It could be a podium or something so that you could also use the roof, so that the roof could also be a green space or maybe even more valuable units and things like that. And then arrange it around that infrastructure. It doesn't have to be like a high-rise condominium, because I also don't think that everything has to be high-rise condominium. More gyapon mag high-rise condominium. What's the point of a high-rise condominium if there's still no open space to offset for that? So finding this right balance of this, you know, blue-green open space that serves as a resilience background, and then carefully organizing maybe like stacked units or like medium rise development around that. That is what I feel it should look like. I won't be able to tell you exactly what yet, because it will depend side by side. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
But
Mhm.
just giving the thinking process.
Unsay reason ng anong gi-turn down nila yan katong proposal ninyo? Like, did they give you any
I don't
specific
know, but also if I
reason?
think about it, if I'm in their shoes, like, why do I need to change if this model is in demand and if it's working? Because housing will always,
It's
yeah,
profitable.
housing will always be in demand. This mod,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mo pud yan, no, na marag ang mao lagi kay I think ang basta developer marag it's a given and it's really profit driven. They don't really, though the only time that they mention quality of life is sa mga ads just to entice people to buy it, but they don't really look into the quality of life sa
What
people,
I
'di ba?
wish they also realize is that this actually increases value of development. There are studies. There are
Yes.
studies.
Uh-huh.
Even in China also underwent massive flooding problems in 2012. They underwent this whole sponge city revolution, and now there are multiple sponge cities all over China. There are these huge blue-green parks that are able to handle floodwaters while also cleaning and whatever. They have noticed increase in land valuation in the surrounding areas, sometimes up to 300%. This is also across the board. Even in
Wow.
Singapore, that park that I mentioned, that has naturalized their canal, the land valuation also increased by, I think, 3 or 4%. It's not much because Singapore is already very green. It's already green namandaan, but even if it's already green, there's still an improvement. This is the same also in other countries where they have measured, valuation of land around nature and new public parks and things like that. So they have to get out. They have to get out of their head on their assumptions of how they perceive value. Because I actually think if designed well and thought through, and they are willing to look through their feasibility model or whatever, it could be highly possible that they could be earning more. It could be more profitable. In
Yes.
addition,
Mhm.
this helps your reputation. Look at what happened to madrasas. it takes one project under public scrutiny that will ruin your reputation, right? What if other developers are also worried about the same thing? Like, halaka, I have actually an up and coming development also somewhere here. Am I gonna be facing public backlash? Are they gonna stop this project or whatever? Now I think they should start to worry about brand image, reputation being blocked by the community, because
Right.
now the community is out for blood because they are directly receiving. If they don't start to think, no, no, okay, maybe we should do something. Maybe we really should start to rethink. That I think this whole all of this will catch up to them one day unless they change now. But mo lagi wala gusto mag-una. So let's see who's like, well, you have to be a visionary black sheep to do that. What from the all the things I've blabbered, what are the things that you find most striking or surprising or interesting?
Definitely building around watersheds. Taking water scanning dito kita mo build around sa atong city and community.
Why do you think we don't?
Okay,
Why do you
it's
think? Why do you
unheard
think we
of
don't do it?
because of akong masud gyud sa akong na it's impractical based on the mind sa mga kuan nato karon, and we're profit driven. Ingana gyud. We're profit driven and
Yeah,
oh, like I can't think
yeah.
of anything strong right now na argument na maka-counter ana. Oh yeah, I guess ang akong kuan day, ang question ako is based sa imong gisulti sa imong proposal and looking at kaning blueprint na to of the current kuan sa Cebu na to, no? Murag it seems hopeless na to like redo everything na at this point. Kay murag katag na kayo, our roads are too tight. If you expand the roads, daghan kay maapektuhan. So kung ingana yan like on a more realistic level, kung ikaw like given when let's just say the stars has aligned in your favor na tagaan kag chance to redo Cebu or to do with it as you please, like asa ka mong start and how would you approach it, man?
Yeah.
Well, I know how you would approach it based sa katong imong giingon, but like where do we start exactly?
Before I answer that, more bitaw like the example you gave na kanang, actually, yeah, it does seem pretty bleak because everything is built up now and infrastructure are there, and it's hard to widen roads or things like that. But I'm like, why do we do it for highways? Why do we do it for
Yeah.
flyovers? Why do we spend so much to build reclamation? Why, if it is infrastructure, pwede man. And that is even more expensive. Like di ba, we widen we widen roads sometimes for highways and things like that. That has happened several times. Why not we do it to make space for nature? I think sometimes, like, we're just very biased towards infrastructure, and this kind of conventional planning models. And to answer your question, I would really do an in-depth mapping first, um, because we never know where the opportunities are. I would even go down to map, is this an empty piece of land? Asaman ang where are the areas of land that the government or the city owns, for example? Is this a piece of land that maybe the owner is willing to sell? Is this a piece of property that maybe the developer is opening to do some?
Yes.
Once you start
Right.
to map that out, if we take like Guadalupe River, for example, and then we start murabitag tracing the river or something, and then really understanding the stakeholders. Some of them could even be schools. Daghang man kaayo mga schools that are directly next to the river, CIT, even churches are next to the river. Once we map out these actors, we could even gather them. Um, but it has to have a strong vision. Um, and within that strong vision, someone has to take the lead, and there has to be a pilot. Ideally, it is a like a low hanging fruit pilot. Ideally, maybe it's either land that has been donated, mayor, or yeah, or like owned by the province, or something like that. And then let's do a trial. Munang I really really hate it when the solutions proposed are so like 100 million peso dam or something like that. Like, can we just start small? Nature
Yes,
doesn't take
yes.
much in order to show results. We have to we actually have to trial and error because we have to make sure that it works. We have to make sure that it works. And then the public has to see it. Okay, sometimes, to see is to
Yeah, they have
or
to see
to see
results,
is to
diba?
believe. And then once we have those pilots, then we could maybe even collate these as best practices or whatever, or start to promulgate this into more sites or something. And then before you know it, you have a mosaic of landowners or developers or mosaic siya because maybe someone will do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and all of a sudden there's a bigger space here, so you could put a park there. Or maybe this is up for redevelopment, so someone is actually willing to develop in a way that actually contributes to this vision. Ingala ba? That is the only way I could see it happening, especially for a city that is already very, very built up without papas everything. um, in fact, I think this is even more powerful because it would require community, it would require support, it would require the support of all of these actors to do their part. Once they are involved na, oh, I am actually contributing to to my part in this watershed or this river, then they will be the stewards, right? Because they actually lent to this vision. Kaysa we just, like, oh, river is the jurisdiction of DPWH and DNR. Oh, we don't have to do anything. So there's no ownership. If there's no ownership, there's no stewardship. So I think we need to lay claim again to steward to so that we have direct accountability, and also we reclaim power so that kita ang kamao mo barog ba. We know how to make ourselves resilient again without having to rely on, other agencies that are not yet there.
And sakto imong giingon no in terms of stewardship. Maybe it's more on has to do with our personal attachments and kanang like a deeper like connection with kaning say sa Cebu, di ba? I think it starts there
Yeah.
for us to really appreciate and have a clear vision on what we want to achieve.
Yeah.
I guess katong sa imo pod giingon na question gini na sakto ka ang nganong dili nato buhaton kay it's the mindset not only sa mga politicians or kaning sa government but even sa mga like even sa citizens itself.
Everything boils down to mindset.
Yeah, daghan pa unta ko ganahan istorya pero sige na lang only when you have time na lang in the future.
Yeah.
But mo na I hope na mo spread ni imong
Akong rant.
kaning plan nimo for Cebu sa more. Pero nanay ni duol nimo na kuan na kanang potential na murag has ni align sa imong own
Mm.
values.
A few.
That's good.
Because of that post,
Hmm?
man, nahibong ko like there are people who, yeah, the Cebu Chamber of Commerce reached out. That's an example, right? If you think
Nice.
about it, business will be affected. So it is
Right.
more they also realize like, yeah, they want to see what they could do. Um, yeah, it really requires everyone. And the beautiful thing about Cebu is that daghang kita, but somehow we're close knit. There's a strong community. We know a lot of common people. And I think that if we just get together and do exactly what is right, for the love of our city. In fact, I read some comments or some people na nag-share na mura bitaw, yeah, I agree because I just genuinely love Cebu. Same for me. Like, why did I do this? Why did I do it for free? This is all of my own initiative because I genuinely love Cebu and I care about Cebu and I care about where we're going. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. So if we just stop and think about what we're doing and think about what we could do right and then actually work towards that, I think it would more like the ball will turn because people already care about the city.